If you can please do me a favor and try to keep your comments within a 2-minute time frame so I can get as many people to participate in this exchange. So now I want your take on what you've heard so far, and let's go from there because I want you all to really start talking with our panelists. So let's start now. Who wants to be brave enough to get started? I see a hand up front.
Yes, my name is Marty D. Spikner. I've been playing music around here for years, had the privilege and honor of playing with those great folks up there, and been knowing Bernie and all you guys. I love you all.
Love you back.
One of the major things that I heard from this conversation is that blues is the lower form of music and everything, and I think that's the wrong place that blues belong. I understand that blues is the foundation of of American music, which one, it doesn't get the history or it doesn't get the acclaim that it does. So a lot of people, like Alonzo was saying, when it came to looking for original music or something, they lowered themselves and reached down to the blues and grabbed something from that and used it and became rich off of it. The history of the blues has been, where people it's been kept down. So with this organization and what's going on today, hopefully it'll rise up to where it belongs at the foundation of American music. And a lot of people, when I was coming up, learned how to play and everything. I looked at blues. It was simple, it was easy and stuff like that. I wanted to play all the jazz, I wanted to play all the hard stuff because I figured when you played the hard stuff, you could play anything. But the thing about the blues is, if you don't feel it, if you don't know how to get those grooves right, if you don't really feel it, like I was talking to Big George Brock, I was playing with him for a minute, and we both said, it's not the technical aspect, but it's being able to feel the music and the blues. And one of the things that I heard from a jazz musician, he said, if you don't know how to play the blues, you don't know how to play anything. So you have to reach down and grab that music and bring it up, because really that's the foundation and it belongs on top. That's all I got.
Okay. I see another hand up, and then I hear our panelists doing the amen up here. So let's get another person from the audience, a hand up front. And I see, is there someone here on the side too? Okay, great. And then we'll come back to the panelists because I think a couple of them want to respond.
Okay. Hello, I have a question. Why did people at the time give blues music such a negative stigma, like the pastors? Did they have a reason for that? Do you know what that is?
Yeah. Okay, anyone from our panelists? Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah. What was now with rock and roll, they associated different kinds of dope. And with other music, but with the blues, they associated whiskey. As a matter of fact, many musicians thought that whiskey made them play the blues better. That's still true today. Okay? That's not correct. Don't do that.
A lot of also,
so I'm going to say the answer to your question, and plenty is whiskey.
African American and African people were always spiritual people, and this is what it was back to the church. But everybody wasn't in church. All blues musicians weren't in church. All people who love the blues were not in church. So that's that divide right there that came about. So that's what we've got to really get to the roots of. Really get to the roots of. I see Steve Wallman, who was played with Oliver Sane for so many years. I see Marty Spikner. I see Jimmy Hinds. None of these people on this stage, on this dais right here, have gotten the recognition that they should get because of the fact, for several reasons. First of all, they're black. Secondly, they don't control. They're not in control. And it's who's in control as to what you hear and what you will not hear. Sometimes it's omitted, purposely, sometimes just from ignorance. But You've got to level the playing field, not them. They have some of the best music you can this side of heaven, but you can't hear it because we're not in control. And those who are in control oftentimes won't not allow it to be heard.
Okay. I saw another hand up front, a hand here too, okay? And then we come back up front. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hi, could you speak more about, you were talking about people having control, and you said there were two aspects of it, whether they know it or they're ignorant of it. Could you talk more about how we can make it a more level playing field?
Well, sure. You can demand from the radio stations or TV stations, whatever the platform you're in tune to, as to asking them to play the music that you want to hear, some of the artists that you want to hear, some that you've heard that you don't hear in modern media. You know, that's simple as that. You'd be surprised how much power that you have as a listener. Mm-hmm. You have no idea what one letter or one phone call could do to a music director or program director or station manager or promotions director. You have that power. And there's so much good product out there that you'll never hear because perhaps that one person don't particularly like it. That's the power that you have. And you got to access that power. But you got to realize you have the power, first of all. And you do have it.
Bernie, when was the last time we meaning St. Louis, had a good blues radio station? How long has it been?
Well, KDHX is now playing the blues, but they're not a blues station.
Right.
You know. So
I should have said.
It's been 25 years, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah, at least 25 years.
I knew it. I just kind of wanted to
I know
get
Marsha
that out
knew
there
it.
because that's a problem.
Yeah.
I want to maybe interject. Bernie, you wrote a book, Death of Black Radio.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so part of, thank you, Bernie, for doing that. Part of what you are also saying is that because, yes, we may have all these different radio stations, we can go internet, we can go everywhere and, find music. But if I can just briefly go back to a comment you made about people requesting and people being in control, so if you can maybe relate that to what you covered in your book, Death of Black Radio.
Well, in certain sections, I was talking about crossover music. I was talking about soul music, talking about blues music. I was talking about who owns and so forth. You know, the conglomerates, when the Reagans in 1982 deregulated, the FCC, rules and regulations, that's when all the conglomerates came in and bought up all the radio stations because black folks didn't have money to buy radio stations. They formed what called MESBICs, certain groups, in order to give them the power to buy stations. But that deregulation wiped that out. And then Kevin Powell's son, Little Powell, he further deregulated the FCC rules and regulations, 7, 8 years ago. And then the conglomerates came in and bought up everything else. There is nothing we can control. Those who are in control because they have the money to control. But also, a lot of folks don't want to hear black music. They go to lengths not to allow certain artists to be aired in certain areas. That sounds really harsh. It sounds untrue, but it is real. Ask these people right here. Ask Marty. We can't control it. The only thing we can do is ask for fairness from these people who are interested, who are here right now, and perhaps listening to us on the air.
Okay. I think, Terry, you've had your hand up a while, so, okay, thank you.
I want to go back to what Ms. Evans said about truth, and then I want to ask the question again about religion and what it had to do with bringing the blues down, okay? Because what I found out from working where I work now is research helps a lot, because the father of gospel, his blues name was Georgia Tom. And if everybody didn't know who Georgia Tom is, that's Thomas
Thomas
Dorsey.
Dorsey.
Right.
Thomas A. Dorsey.
Yes.
So can you all, somebody address, what it is we can do to help our religious leaders or our churches to, get better in that area?
Terry, I went to a gentleman who was supposed to be an expert on the blues, an author, an authentic follower of the blues. And I went to his house one time, and he'd written several books on the blues and then also on soul music. I opened up one page and saw 5 mistakes that I knew about right then. 5 that I knew were wrong, but yet and still, he was considered an accomplished author and expert on the blues. So oftentimes when you do research, you're researching somebody's research that isn't authentic, that's not viable. That's what's happening. So if you don't know the source, I mean the true source, you may be misled just like others may be misled. Yeah.
Sounds like
Yes,
Facebook.
the question is, where was the blues? Who born the blues?
Yeah.
Who born it? Where did it come from? What people did it come from? That answer don't change. We can flip-flop, talk about racism and this and that. It don't change whose music it is. Where it come from. I think that's what Bernie's saying. You can ask a lot of different questions in a lot of different places, but that's not the truth. There ain't but one truth. It was born in America of black people under certain conditions.
Yes.
And you don't have to put another culture, another race, and other peoples down in order to lift yourself up. You could be wonderful and still uplift yourself and uplift others also with you. You don't have to put anybody down for you to be uplifted.
But that's
I
what's
think
happened
that
to our
comes-
music. That's what's happened.
But that comes with, because we're in a capitalistic situation here in America. That's comes from making money off of it.
Yeah.
When you start making money off of it, you get your cheats, your thieves, your liars about the money. That's what's happening, with that scene. We sit there talking about religious people and the blues. My right hand up. I don't know no heavier drinkers. I really don't. And I worked in the church a lot with music. And sure, most of them go after get that taste before I do. So, again, we're asking these questions. Don't leave out things like motives like money, and the blues. Also now, anybody can play the blues, anybody can play anything. Anybody can't make me feel it, though. If I can't feel it, I don't even know why you playing it.
Okay. So it sounds like we're also looking at the issue of blues music. In order for it to be monetized is to make it homogenous, to make it bland, without real feeling, even though now people tend to use the word soul for almost anything and everything. So reaction, again, from those of you in the audience, participants, as well as panelists. I have a couple of hands here in the back, on the side, and
yeah, my name's
and then
Ray.
we come back to the panelists.
My name's Ray Goody, and I'm an amateur musician, which includes playing a little bit of blues. And I also have a background in cultural anthropology. My first introduction to real blues was when I lived in Chicago, And I had a roommate who was just wild about all the traditional stuff, Muddy Waters, and all of the guys that he played with. So we would go to blues clubs. We lived very close to the Checkerboard Lounge, Teresa's Music Lounge, the blues club on the north side we would frequent to hear Big Walter Horton especially. So we had nothing but reverence for the classical blues musicians, and we never associated with any kind of stigma with it because we just loved it, and we saw how it really informed a lot of the other music that we had, probably originally been introduced through the blues through people like the Beatles, Eric Clapton, who did appropriate a lot of blues music. So what is the takeaway for those of us who have reverence for the blues and don't associate it with any kind of stigma?
Junior Wells and Buddy Guy also played the checkerboard quite often, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, those are staples at the checkerboard. And in order to go to the Checkerboard Lounge, you'd have to go to 43rd Street, right? So apparently you didn't mind going to 43rd Street. And you're very rare. See, because you went there because you thought this was a genre or a music that you wanted to hear. So you'd go to 43rd and South Park, or King Drive now. But there's so many who did not. All they got was this bland thing from the books or from the movies, which was totally untrue and unreal. You heard the real thing, and I bet it changed your life. I would assume. Certainly changed the way you played music. Right. That's all I had to say.
I have a question. If you had not gone to one of these places to hear the blues, would you have been able to hear it on your favorite radio station?
Well, yeah, and let me be honest. I was in Chicago because I was at the University of Chicago, which is, if anything defines white privilege, it probably is that university. But we had a student station where we had blues shows, and it was very much music like you hear on KDHX, a whole panoply of different genres of music. But I don't know that I would have experienced the blues the way I did then had I not been in Chicago. I don't think I would have.
Chicago is a racially divided city too. It's one of the most racist cities in the country.
Another hand.
Just thought I'd throw that in.
We have another hand here, and then we have one back there too. We have two more hands in the back and one up here. Okay, got it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone being here. It's in a 4-year march as far as I'm concerned. My name's Ivan Martin. You may have seen me around town. Sometimes I'm even on TV. I helped get the Civilian Oversight Board established here in the city, and now we're working on subpoena power and all that. And I want to, tag on to what Alonzo said and the comment, sit down and play. First of all, I know our Blues Society here does a great job. They put on that Baby Blues concert every year, and we showcase the blues. But 2 or 3 years ago, I'm trying to think back, Marquise was the showcase of the show itself. And he was playing, and he had a few pieces left. And I remember standing up, and I made sure people could hear me. And I said, "Your Black Lives Matters." And I pointed to a few other folks in the band. I said, "Your Black Life Matters." Hear how quiet it is in here? That's what happened. So the lesson I took from that with some of my colleagues that are out there working very hard to bring social justice to not only the musicians, but to all the people of color that have been oppressed in our city, in our nation, is that make that happen. I say don't just like the music, love the people that bring you that music. And make sure you're doing something in your life, even when you're playing music. I'm associating with all these beautiful people and all the joy they've brought to us and enriched our lives. Make sure that they can have peace and liberty and justice, and that they can go home at night in their automobiles and get the same treatment that the rest of us do. That might sound a little preachy here, but I think that's part of what I wanted to come and hear the discussion, to see what the larger blues community is going to commit to do. So don't just throw your money down and say, play on. Let's show them how to play on and make their lives and put it on an equal basis that the rest of us have had. The oppression has to stop. And if the folks in this room, with their music and with the audience and stage and command they can have, let's try to find more ways to support all that. And I hope the blues will help us get there, and all the other musicians will help us get there, because we still have an awful lot of work to do, because I certainly enjoy your music. And one final thing, I go to Clarksdale a lot. They have a cultural center down in Clarksdale, Mississippi. If you haven't been down there, please get down there. But one of the things on their wall, they say, blues music is African music. So learn a little bit about Africa and learn to appreciate the cultures that they have too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, the time is wrapping up, so I have a couple of people here. I have a couple of people in the back. So let's go ahead and let's start moving to wrap this up, because I know we're supposed to end this at 3:30, and we still have at least another 10 minutes or so. So let's go ahead and entertain these other questions. Yes.
Okay. I wanted to challenge the panel to give us a little history of the origins of the blues, like from the original work songs of the slaves that worked in the field, and how out of the Great Migration, particularly in the center of the country where we live, how they migrated up from Mississippi to St. Louis, from St. Louis to Chicago, and that's why you have a unique form of the blues in the center of the nation. Some parts of the South that I have been to, like Georgia, you don't hear the blues, you know, and the black people don't know about the blues. So it seems to be unique in the center of the nation, from Mississippi straight towards, you know, the northern sectors.
Promised land.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So
migrating, trying to get these jobs.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it came up with the gospel songs.
And we were trying to get these jobs, these packing houses were up here.
And if you notice, the gospel song, the gospel songs that were sung during the emancipation and you know, the revolution, more or less, and those gospel songs also could be considered blues songs.
Yeah, they were.
They're the same thing. They were freedom
Zeta
songs.
Thorpe was blues, yeah.
Yeah, they were nothing but from the soul. They were songs from the soul, song of the heart, songs from oppression,
You
songs
know,
from hope and faith.
The musical progressions 1, 4, and 5, that's technically the blues. I don't want to hear no music with no 1, 4, and 5 in it. Motown was so big because Motown's music is full of the blues. Ain't Too Proud to Beg, that's a blues. How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You, Marvin Gaye, that's the blues. Same progressions, 1, 4, and 5. If ain't no blues in it, I think some of the English stuff don't have blues in it, some of it. I don't want to hear it. It's weird sounding stuff without 1, 4, and 5 in it. Okay?
Okay, I have a hand back there and one here, and we're going to have to probably start rounding it up. So who wants to go first? Gentleman in the back, and then our lady up here? Okay, thank you.
Yes, Charles Johnston again. I'm one of those persons who got into this sort of, like I said, I've been hanging around with the Bottoms Up Blues Gang, and Jeremy introduced me to some historical references. So my knowledge of the blues as a cultural form is from my reading and hanging out with the various musicians, and one year spending a lot of time down at BB's after a divorce. Needless to say, it saved my life. You know, I learned what it meant to have the blues. Needless to say,
he had the blues.
In terms of the concept of the stigma of the blues, the reading I've done seems, you know, there are a number of reasons to apply that our culture has applied a stigma to the blues. First, it's from African Americans who have been stigmatized since they've been brought over here on slave ships. That is the most critical factor. The other is, you know, in a culture that's dominated by white folk, anything that, you know, and the European traditions of music, anything that's not part of that European tradition was considered valueless, was not valued at all, or of very little value. But it's something else I learned, but to go beyond that, in terms of the history of the blues, like the gentleman was pointing out, the Mississippi River is the key link. Mm-hmm. The Delta had its sound, but what I've learned from my reading of the history is that even St. Louis had a sound at the same time. It grew, you know, it was a more urban style rather than what we now call a country style. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry if I'm going to ramble a bit here, but the different styles of the blues, again, from what I've read, was developed by the record companies to sell to specific markets.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes they would label something a blues record because it was made by an African American.
Race record.
Race record.
That's right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Race records. And so the term blues kind of got mashed around with all kinds of music, musical styles, just because of the race of the musician. And again, the stigma also comes from the fact that a lot of this music was played in the bordellos and the sporting houses, as they called them. Mm-hmm. At least from what I've read about St. Louis history in the blues. You know, and
so at this point, can we sort of wrap it up a little bit? Because I do have the young lady down here that I promised to give her time. Thank you.
Point about the history. I've been learning a lot of it by searching out the grave sites of local blues musicians, and have found over 30 people buried in and around St. Louis. And in terms of church music, Thomas Dorsey and locally Willie Mae Ford Smith helped make help make blues a part of gospel music.
Okay, thank you. Now, right here, thank you.
Hi. So I thought it would be really lovely if you felt like sharing a story of yours, if you have one, about maybe when you were with someone and they learned about the blues, or they discovered it through you or with you. That might be a
Who was that directed to?
And if you have a moment that stands out to you where you knew that your music mattered to someone.
I think each person on this dais,
oh boy,
they've reached somebody. That's why we're here. That's why Ross reached out to us, hopefully. Let me say this before, Ross. I know you're almost running out of time. Everybody who has a smartphone or a tablet or something, if you want to hear what Jimmy was talking about, Google or YouTube Amazing Grace. Mm-hmm. hear the history of Amazing Grace, the true history of Amazing Grace, and you'd be just enlightened. I'm sorry, Ross.
No, go ahead. Who wants to address what she raised, I do believe, and that is, some experience, if you can just briefly take maybe about a minute per person to just identify some experience where either you've been touched or you have, in essence, inspired someone else.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I have a friend whose mom has Alzheimer's, and she's really going through a rough time. And she got one of my CDs. And on one of the CDs, there's a certain song that her mom really enjoys, listen to, dance to. She doesn't do anything else. She would not eat, but she listened to this music. And this person came to me and she said, I really, really, really am thankful and I appreciate you because you are making my mom happy. That was good. It made me feel good.
That's a really difficult question for me to answer without citing so many instances where hopefully I've touched someone. I'd like to think that. Or just to look and see someone from the stage who's really with me. That means so much to me because I feel like our music, when I'm on stage, we're in this together. I'm here to make you feel good, and believe it or not, you make me feel good. We're in this together. But in 5 seconds or so, the first thing I thought about was Oliver saying, oh boy. Minutes before he left us, he said something to me, and he was crying. And the only thing I could think to do, I was holding his hand, he was holding my hand, and I was singing with him at the time. And I just started singing. And I sang this song. I believe it was Let's Stay Together. And I could just feel, whatever it is that you feel. I could feel him going away but being with me at the same time, if that makes sense. So I would say that that's one of the moments. I've got 1,000 of them, but that's the first one that came to my mind. And God bless you, Oliver. I know you're loving this.
I'm surprised, constantly surprised at the young guys that say that I'm a bass player by trade. These guys I'm still playing bass because I heard you. Countless of them.
My moment was every day on my radio program, I start off with Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Yes.
And also then I would play something by perhaps James Cleveland or some other inspirational song. Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud by James Brown. And everybody after that every day would come up to me and says, Bernie, you really started my day. That's to me.
Thank you for those songs, Bernie. Heard them every day.
Well, thank you all very much for being here, and I do hope that our initial conversation, this first one dealing with stigma of the blues, is just the beginning of the series of conversations we are to have here at KDHX, here on this stage. In fact, next week we'll have the present reality of blues music today, and the panelists for that conversation will consist of John May, Dion Brown, Jean Dobbs Bradford, am I correct? And I think the last person is Sharon Faulkner.
Faulkner.
Yes, Faulkner. Okay. So,
I just want to say Andy Coco is one of the best persons in this area.
Okay.
And Andy should be recognized. So I really get a chance to mention Andy. I personally know Andy. And I love him.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Just show of hands as a way to wrap up. How many of you learned something new today? Okay. Wow. Okay. Very good. And of course, at this point, then the next thing I want to do is to have you all to stand up. And, now you get a chance to sort of, move about by standing up. And if you don't mind, okay, let's just stand up for a moment and just recognize and show our appreciation to our panelists. So thank you very much, Bernie, Uvee, Marsha, and Jimmy. I know I have been honored to be on the same stage with you. Thank you all who are here for being here. Thank you.